Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Kucinich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ranking member.
Secretary Paulson, in your testimony, you justify telling Mr. Lewis that the government might remove Bank of America management if they terminated the deal to acquire Merrill Lynch. Excuse me. You state, quote, such an action would show a colossal lack of judgment and would jeopardize Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and the financial system, unquote. Secretary,
yeah.
If a lack of management judgment merits decisive governmental action, what about potential violations of the law? Mr. Paulson, were you aware of concerns felt at the Fed and Treasury that Ken Lewis's management team failed to do due diligence in acquiring Merrill Lynch and possibly violated securities laws by withholding material information from his shareholders to get the vote for the merger with Merrill?
I've become aware from some of the emails that this committee has released and other documents.
Did you know at that time
that there were concerns? And I know that there were some concerns
at that time. Did you know, Mr. Secretary?
By staff members, some concerns at that time as to whether how, along the lines of what you expressed on due diligence. I had not heard concerns at that time about securities laws.
Now, Chairman Bernanke testified here that he shared those concerns about Bank of America's management. Did you share the concerns with anyone?
In terms of concerns about Bank of America's management, here's what I would say about management. Congressman, I have been involved and was involved in at least 3 situations when I was at Treasury where CEOs were replaced: Fannie, Freddie, AIG.
Let me ask you this on that point. Did in 2008, did you ever inform the management of any systemically significant bank that they would be forced out for any reason?
Well, I would say this. Here's the calculus. You have to ask yourself, is this management capable of running the firm, and is there someone else there or someone else you know of that can do a better job? And I would say that these large, complex financial institutions are not easy to run, and it's not easy to find strong people to run them during a financial crisis.
Well, I just want to say this, Mr. Paulson, and we have a limited time here, so I appreciate you answering these questions. The investigators of this committee have reviewed tens of thousands of pages, including notes of conversations you participated in, where the federal response to Bank of America's problems was crafted. These documents clearly show that you were an advocate of aggressive fiscal response. You advocated for a large cash injection, a very large asset protection plan. But nowhere in these documents did we find evidence that you advocated for holding Bank of America's management accountable for failing to do due diligence and for withholding potentially material information from shareholders. So, Mr. Secretary, did you in fact advocate for requiring such accountability as a condition of the bailout you were developing?
I advocated the accountability we put in place, which was we treated Bank of America like Citigroup. We treated them differently than those that went to the TARP the first time. So we had tougher restrictions on executive comp, and we had provisions on foreclosure mitigation. But in terms of replacing the CEO, in this situation, it was my judgment, and it was a judgment of their regulator, that it was appropriate to keep Mr. Lewis. That this is a decision that's made by the board of directors, and for regulators to come in and decide to replace him, we didn't think that was appropriate.
Now, Mr. Paulson, as you know, invoking the MAC, however ill-considered it would have been, was not against the law. Meanwhile, Bank of America's decision to withhold material information about a merger from shareholders and their failure to do due diligence are potential violations of law. Perhaps you can explain to this committee how a Secretary of the Treasury can justify punishing an unwise but lawful act while ignoring potentially illegal ones.
Well, in terms of legality...
Could you speak closer to the mic?
Yeah, I would say in terms of legality, I think that's... I'm not... I certainly don't feel qualified to sit here and opine on whether there was an illegal action. And I certainly have not seen evidence of an illegal action, and that is in terms of the relationship between B of A and the capital markets and the relationship between B of A and the SEC. I think that's a matter for others to opine on.
Gentleman's time
thank
has
you,
expired. I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr.
Ohio.
Chairman.